Hey guys. All right, so we are about to have an exciting time here. I am at my buddy Chewy Flores' house, and some amazing things are about to transpire. Also, Michael Marvosh is here. You guys may remember him from such other projects that we worked on, the Starters or Finishers Workshop, and we've done some other things together as well. Amazing guys here, and we're about to talk about some things that are pretty controversial, but I think it's going to be worth touching these touchy subjects. And so let's go ahead and get in here and get this started. You guys aren't going to want to miss this.
Let's stop right there. You know as well as I do that there are a lot of things to talk about in this world. And a lot of it goes by the wayside. Maybe it has something to do with the way we're talking about it. You may be thinking, talk is cheap. And I would say, if everyone was putting their money where their mouth is, then the talk of the world may have a little more gravity. Either way, expression is a huge part of our lives. People have the power to come together and create harmony, or they can create discord. As cliche as it may sound, it makes you wonder what effect we would have on the world if we constructively accepted all for who they are. Let's see what happens when three individuals come together and share their fundamentally different beliefs.
All right, thank you guys so much for being here. Once again, Power That Be has some amazing things to bring about in our world. And it's a pleasure to have everyone here. We've got, once again, Michael Marvosh. Thank you so much for being here. And a wonderful new guest we have today is Chewy Flores. He is absolutely awesome. And he's basically an explorer of this world. He's a master in leadership. He's brought about some wonderful qualities in my life, so it's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Same.
Yeah, and so today Michael Marvosh is actually going to lead our conversation off on some amazing things.
Lead it. So I just, like we were talking about earlier, I had this good example of the sort of thing that we'll be talking about today. So I went to see this movie, Arrival, this weekend, which is a science fiction movie. It was fascinating. I recommend you guys definitely go see it. And a quick summary of the movie is that some aliens arrive on Earth and parks 12 spaceships all around the planet. And the movie is really about the mystery. Why are they here? What do they want? How do we communicate with them? And so the fascinating thing about the movie was not that it was science fiction, but that it was really a study of human nature wrapped in a science fiction movie. And so apart from in the audience trying to figure out, okay, how are the characters going to figure out this riddle, figure out how to talk to the aliens? There was also a really interesting study of the way that different people respond to challenging situations, specifically unknown. So in the movie, there were some characters who reacted to this unknown, these aliens, with fear. And therefore, they said, "Okay, we don't know what this is. This is an unknown. We have to put a show of strength up. We have to fire some warning shots across their bow. We have to be ready to defend ourselves." And some of them even go on the offensive, in their own attempt to preserve their safety. Mm-hmm. Whereas there's other characters who are like, "No, we don't know what this is. We need to talk to them. We need to understand them. We need to learn about this unknown." And it occurred to me as I was watching the movie that this was actually an examination of some of the core motivations that different people have. And I when I was watching the movie, I actually identified them as like a conservative and a progressive response to the unknown. Mm. And the conservative response was, I don't know what that is. I'm afraid of it. I'm going to keep it at a distance. I'm going to attack it if I need to in order to keep myself safe. Mm-hmm. And the progressive response was, I don't know what that is, but I'm curious about it. I want to learn more about it. And I am even going to risk putting myself in danger in order to learn about it. And what I took from that is those are two core fundamental beliefs that people have. Both are valid. I don't know what that is. I'm afraid of it. I don't know what that is. I'm curious about it. And And there's a lot of conflict inherent in that, because the people who are curious about that unknown thing, these people are attacking it. And it's like, how do you resolve those situations? So the reason that we're having this conversation, the conversation is about, what do you do when you have different fundamental beliefs than someone? Like,
Right.
Is it always this conflict? Is there a way to listen and resolve those things? Or is that just something that will always divide us? And I'm not an expert in this. I am a student of life, and I would say that's the only expertise I have in this. But it's a fascinating conversation, and it's one that I know you and I have had often, Brian, because we have such different perspectives and such different kind of core beliefs about what make life. So, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Thanks for letting me do that lengthy introduction. And learning more about your perspective too, Chewy, because it's a tough thing that we all have to deal with.
I think that's wonderful that you brought all, and that's a great representation of that, because you're right, we have had many conversations, and Chewy and I, we've had some conversations about beliefs as well, and it's very, very much a relevant thing, because I like how you put that. Are we always going to be divided, or is there something we can do here to be, maybe just bringing about sheer awareness to it, of saying, this is something we notice. It's been happening since however long ago. We've had wars about, whose God is right and whose God is more real than the next person's. And I find it interesting that a lot of it stems from those types of things. And then it even exists in little petty things, because it seems to work its way up to that surface level where, like what you were talking about before we started, is strawberry or vanilla ice cream better? Essentially, I mean, I'm not trying to be too minimalistic here, but you could kind of say that there's been wars over whose flavor of ice cream is better. In a certain manner of speaking,
You're going to have to be more specific than just dropping a vague comment like that, Brian. What do you mean?
Okay, sure. So basically, we can use that concept about how some things we consider, and it's relative and a matter of perspective, about what is worthy of conflict and what is not, and not that that's really what we want to talk about, in this conversation. But I think it's interesting to me that it could be the most petty thing, or it could be something that really has something to do with someone's core beliefs. And which direction does it go? Is it the core beliefs that are causing those petty issues? Because if so, then it's sort of connected in a certain way. So that fascinates me, that throughout our day we can enjoy each other's company, or the little things can be causing us to be looking at core beliefs and wondering, where are we going with this? Can I embrace this person and figure out why it is that I have a difference there, and what to do about that difference? I think it's interesting.
You're never going to be able to. Sometimes you're not going to be able to see the other person's belief, even if you try to understand it. So it's going to be hard to really understand the other person. I don't even know where I'm going.
Well, that's what's interesting right now. You putting yourself out there.
Because me and you have very different beliefs when with religion and all that, And sometimes you talk to me about this and that, and I'm like, yeah, but I don't approve of it. You know what I mean? And we both agree to disagree with what we talk about sometimes. And I don't understand what you say sometimes. I'm like, yeah, but I don't approve of it, and that doesn't mean we're arguing.
That's right.
You see kind of where I'm getting at?
That's an important point, that we are able to move with that.
Yeah, we move with it, even though we don't agree with it.
Yeah, it's not a dead end road. It's not. And you brought up something interesting when we were talking before, that Michael, that it can be threatening to some people. And for me, like you and I don't feel threat, and that's what fascinates me, is where's the line there? What is it that actually triggers someone's copacetic nature?
Yeah.
And then they'd cross that line to, okay, now your beliefs are threatening mine.
Yeah, that's true, because...
Like, okay, what is that? Where does that come from, and what is that, and what can we do about that? Because I agree with you. I think we maintain a productive atmosphere and a good attitude, regardless of who's believing what.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. Because if the conversation sometimes we have, if you were to talk like that to someone else, like you know what I mean. If you were to talk to someone else, like, come on, like
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he would have a way more defensive approach than I do. I'm strong to my beliefs, but I'm a little more open, and it doesn't mean I'm going to approve of it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's sometimes people. If you're open to other people's opinion, doesn't mean you don't strongly believe in what you believe in. It's just that you're open to other opinions, and you know how to listen to others without arguing. And I think that's how you grow. You know what I mean?
Yes, and you being able, you expressing that right now, like I'm using before when you said I'm just putting my thoughts together. I'm not exactly sure how I want to say this. Even that process, I think, is involved because to put yourself out there there's already an amount of anticipation, I would think, of this nature that we're talking about. Like I don't want to rub someone the wrong way. I'm not aiming to do that, but yet I want to express myself. I want to share who I am.
Yeah.
And so that's interesting. Like as soon as you do that, then it's like, okay, now that element of anticipation is there for what's going to come of this if I express myself. And so I find that fascinating too. That's awesome. You seemed like you wanted to say something.
I don't. I want to say a couple things.
All right.
One, I would love for you guys to share, like, you're kind of speaking in some generalities. Like, if you've got a specific example of something that you're talking about, like, let me have it. But hold that thought for a second, because you asked a relevant question or made a relevant comment, Brian, when you said, at what point is it that people start to get defensive, right? At what point is it that people start to feel like someone else's beliefs are threatening my beliefs? Because that's the point at which people stop. I'm not even going to say listening to each other. I'm going to say acknowledging the validity of someone else's experience. Right. When someone's like, I have this belief, and you say, no, that is so threatening to me. Like, I am so upset by that belief that it's not even okay to me that you have that belief. That's when things start to get scary in a lot of the times, because you have to do that. I think you have to, if you're going to get in a fight, or the most extreme version of a fight, a war with someone, you have to dehumanize them to a certain extent. And that requires you saying, no. Your perspective is, like, broken. So, anyway.
Interesting, yeah.
Like, so, like, Chewy, give me an example.
Well, if we can, it was kind of with religion. That was more specific with
That's
religion.
Great. That's a great example.
Yeah.
When
tell me specifically, like, what was the conversation?
Well, you remember the other day when you were getting off the car and you were like, we're mighty, we're God. And remember, I told him no. That my biggest belief, I was like, no, we're not God. That's not my belief.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the biggest thing. And you said it a few times until I finally said no. Like, I disagree with you on that. I was like, I don't believe I'm God. I
we
believe,
were at the coffee shop?
Yeah. I was like, I believe nothing can be bigger than God.
Right.
I was like, I believe God's in me, the Holy Spirit or whatever, but I'm not God. And then you went with, yes, we're God, and that's how I started. But it didn't offend me. I just told him other people would take it more.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think it depends on the person
and you
too.
see how I have to exercise the same by not being offended with you, quote unquote, disagreeing.
Yeah.
Because, Go ahead.
No, I want you to finish.
I was just gonna say and also I think this ties into where we're going with this, because remember what I said to you is that you said nothing is higher than God, and I asked you the question, okay, so you believe you're separate from God?
Well, no, I'm not separate from God. I said I'm not separate.
Yes, and that's why I asked you that question immediately after, because you did not consider yourself to be God. Now, some would say, well, I'm not God because God is some
Is God separate? Is God separate? That's the question that I followed up with, and there's a reason for that, because the reason I'm going this way is because in my fundamental beliefs, I can say the person across the table, whether it be you or Michael, I can say, all right, their beliefs are coming from a place that I am as well, because that which is life, I believe, is me. So for me, that's what I've done. That's where I can live and be totally okay with what's happening, because I know that it is me from that perspective. And that's why I asked you, so do you believe you're separate from God? Because if you're saying you can't be God, no way are you worthy of that, then are you insinuating that you're separate?
So this is, like, I'm really glad that you brought up this example, because I think it is the best example that I know of the difference in fundamental belief that
Yes.
you and I have,
Yes.
and now that I have a little bit more understanding of what you have. So I think each of us should try and state, like, what is this thing we believe about the nature of God and the meaning of life and that stuff. And I mean, I can characterize what I think about each of you guys, but I'm probably wrong. So I'm going to resist my urge to do that. Like, I was like, I want to tell our viewers what Brian believes. I can't do that. So I will say what I believe. I am not religious, and I don't think that there's a conscious being that is directing things in the universe. I think that we are all puny, minuscule little agents in a world where most things are out of our control, and we're all trying to figure out how to deal with that lack of control as best as we can. I don't know what the meaning of life is. I suspect it has something to do with trying to find the meaning of life. But I think that we are all... I think that we're animals with very complicated brains and emotions and things that we don't understand about ourselves in the universe. So that's what I think. Who wants to go next?
I mean, that's one of the...
Who wants to be wrong?
Now that you said that, and I was talking to you about the other day when we got out of breakfast, that I saw myself, that's the biggest thing you and Brian are separate from, that you believe nothing can be controlled. Brian...
No. I don't believe nothing can be controlled.
Okay.
I believe very little can be controlled.
Yeah.
And I would say we're not necessarily separate in that.
Yeah. And then Brian, Brian's always like, we can control everything that's outside of us.
Right.
What's inside of us controls what's outside.
That's also my impression of what Brian believes, but I would love to hear Brian say it as succinctly as he can.
Sure. So what's interesting about that is because the experience that we have, and I believe that we're all kind of unraveling this to the reason that we experience each other the way we do when it comes to different perspectives and beliefs, and even handling, like I said, the flavor of ice cream on what we think is better. Like, when we go to that level, we can say, all right, how do I feel about this, and how does what someone else feels about it fit into my life? I think that if you can answer that question to yourself and be okay with that answer, and realize that, like, you have the power to answer that question, it gives you a lot of understanding about yourself. And so really, to answer your question, Michael, to explain where I'm coming from, is that if you can go as far as saying, okay, if things that are me, if because I exist, things are. Like the whole I think, therefore I am. It's kind of on that, but it's taking it to the next level. I think, therefore I am, therefore everything else is. And
so you would say that statement. I, Brian, believe that. I think, therefore I am, therefore everything else is.
If you really wanted my place, I would say truth is true. So whatever your truth is, it's true. But when it comes to where I am, that truth is always going to be true in a way that I exist. So that's why when people get in the same room together...
I don't understand that.
Let me elaborate a little bit. The reason we can be in the same place right now
is fundamentally some form of harmony. Because
I don't understand that either.
Okay, think of the ecosystem.
I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be difficult.
No. I'm glad you're asking me to elaborate.
That's good because I still get confused by
So
that too.
and that's the point of this, is the expression is actually the belief, which is what's exciting about it. Remember I said when we were having breakfast that day, it's that I'm not really worried about people agreeing or disagreeing. It's that the expression of it is what allows me to be my belief. So imagine the ecosystem. It's sort of like the birds of a feather flock together type of thing. You've got these plants and animals that exist in a certain portion of the ecosystem, and they work together harmoniously. Well, we have a natural tendency as people to think that, because we dominated this planet, whatever you think domination means, or whether or not that's the way it is or not, there's a lot of beliefs about that too, but put that aside. There is nothing saying that our human behavior is outside of that, or that is not still working with that. No matter how much we think we've defied nature, we are still nature. And so therefore, us three being in this room right now actually allows, or is, because of some form of harmony that could be compared to that. So the reason I'm going to that is I say your beliefs exist in my life for whatever purpose I am. If that makes sense. So where I'm going with this is that perspective is where I come from, where I can say, this person believes this certain way. But you still have the power of using your imagination, your heart, your brain, your spirit, everything to take that and make it what you want. And know that it is what you want because it's in your life. Taking that whole belief to the next level of saying, why would anything ever come into my life that I don't want? That's just a belief system. So can we not decide that the only thing that comes into our life are the things that we want? Can we not live from that perspective? So those are the types of expressions that I enjoy and I live by, if that makes sense. So, for what it's worth. So really, you could say, no, we're not God, and I'll be like, sweet, I'm really glad you're in my experience right now, because that is what I do. I want to hear those things, because then it allows me to express how we are God. How God would even say that we're not.
So you haven't said that.
I just did, though.
You What I heard you say was, I can draw conclusions from interactions. But you didn't say what those conclusions are. Right? So that's like a non-statement. I'm hearing that as a non-statement.
Oh, that's good. Because a lot of it is.
Because what I would love, if I can take control of the conversation.
By all means.
What I would love is for you, Brian, to figure out how to say everything that you just said in one sentence.
Is that what you'd like?
Yeah. But you don't have to figure that out right now because I.
Well, I'm just if I may
Chewy
ask,
thinks.
if I go ahead, Chewy, because I want to ask you why you would like me to do that. I'm curious.
I'm still trying to figure out what you said too. I'm still trying. So you're basically saying everything that I say, that anyone around you says, it's true. Like you believe it.
But it exists the way that I want it to because it's in my life.
Bad or good, nasty, whatever it is.
Those are all just perspectives of what if you think things can be bad. So you think
it's good if something is bad in my way, but you look at it in a good way. You're like, it's good. You know what I mean?
Sure, that's possible. You could say, there's a lot of times where you're like, oh man, I'm feeling this certain way, and I can see it as you growing, or you reaching a new plateau or a new level of being, whatever. It's the freedom of choosing. See, most people don't give themselves the credit or even, and I wouldn't say most people don't, because it's possible that people don't, but it's also possible that people do give themselves the worthiness to decide what their experience is. I think there's a lot of times where we've seen that it is possible through the media, through all kinds of things, that you can completely surrender and basically just, I'm going to use this word right now, absquatulate from your own.
Is that a real word?
Yeah. Basically, absquatulating means you're basically just you're getting out of here. You're leaving. You're not taking responsibility for your experience.
You mean physically or emotionally or
all of it, because
not taking responsibility for your experience.
Yeah, if you say that one thing is not in your control, then where do you draw the line? I really like. I was watching this guy last night on. It's a show called London Real. Mm-hmm. Really awesome stuff. And he had a monk on there talking, and he said, you know what? I had my money. I started doing what I was doing, and I did not want to borrow money, because the minute I taught myself to borrow money, then I would always know how to borrow money. And that's kind of that mentality to me kind of makes me think, the minute you say you don't have control of a part of your experience, then you're going to always know that you can do that. And so what if you go the other way about it and you say, I take responsibility for everything in my experience, therefore that is what I will continue to maintain and work from. That's my vantage point for each action and each intention that I have.
Here's why that's really challenging for me. And I mean, I'm really happy. So I want to step back for a second and say I'm really happy that we're having this conversation, because this is the kind of conversation that I was trying to introduce with the mention of Arrival. It's like, what do you do when you have these different perspectives and they fundamentally conflict? I want to try and describe to you why the perspective that you're sharing, that I hear you sharing, is really challenging to me. I'm going to do it with an example, and it's another movie.
Cool.
There's this movie called Room, which is a really emotionally
I've
challenging movie.
It's amazing, yeah.
And it's about this woman who was kidnapped by a man when she was 17 years old and was locked in a shed in his backyard for 7 years and forced to be his sex slave, essentially. Like, he fed her and would come in and rape her for years. And she had a kid, and that's not part of the story. I mean, that's part of the story, but it's not part of my point. My point is, when you say, Brian, people are not taking responsibility for the things they're experiencing, I think that is really sadly dismissive of people whose life experience is one of not being in control of their own life. I think that is really coming from a place of privilege in your life, and it dismisses a lot of the tragic experiences that happen to people. Now, I have some other thoughts, but I'm going to wait on them.
If I may.
Yeah.
I really like that you bring that up. That's actually one of the big things that I work on when it comes to that. Because you're absolutely right in the sense that there are a lot of things that could cause people to run into a wall with that type of living, that type of perspective. Because they would say, well, what about people that are, have children that were not they were not wanted because they came about by somebody raping them? What if somebody murdered a baby, mutilated a baby, which has happened? These things are real, and we've talked about that. What is real? What is not? See, the aspect of being privileged is an attribute that actually pulls itself right into that equation. Because to have this belief, you cannot not look at that. And so for me, that is definitely something that actually fuels it. Because I can see that, would I believe this way if I was in a third world country right now? If I didn't have electricity and I was sleeping in the cold, or, it's not really cold there all the time, but you get where I'm going? I agree with you. But there's a reason that I'm able to exist this way. And the fundamental belief that I come from is not saying it's not challenging. It's not saying that you don't have to work at this because of what the world is telling you. But you get to decide what the world is telling you.
So what I hear you saying is that you're saying the privileges that you have are the result of your own belief that you have those privileges. And so people who are imprisoned, or people who are in third world countries, or people who are horrendously murdered in the Holocaust and their families were split apart, that's their own fault.
See, we have
That's what I hear.
and that's what's challenging, is because nobody wants to hear, hey, you've created this. Eternally, you've created this. Now, whether or not that's the belief that's going to work for people doesn't matter. It's still happening, correct? So, this is what I always tell people. No matter what.
Wait. Say that again.
So, okay, so this is happening. Now, it's not to be heartless. It's not to be cold. It's not to say, hey, these people that are starving, whether it's their fault or not, it's happening. That's the perspective that I'd like to introduce in the idea here, that people are going to ridicule any manner of beliefs if you're not helping. It's possible. Let's put it that way. It's possible that no matter what you believe, if it's not helping those situations, people will always use those extremes, right? We've heard it over and over. And now, they won't necessarily always, because I believe that that's not going to exist forever. I believe that it's not going to always be that way. It's not the way that it has to be. But let's use third world countries as an example. We've got people that are starving, and I have plenty of food. Now, victimization goes into this. This is what I'm talking about, taking responsibility for your experience. Okay? Does that mean that those people are doing something wrong and that's why they're living in third world countries? Well, there is an element of that, because would you die swimming here? Would you be willing to do that? If you were in a third world country, would you do anything possible? If you're going to die of starving anyways, would you not swim here? Now I can already hear people would be like, you don't live in that situation. You have no right to talk about that. But the truth is, I am allowed to ask those questions. Because what would I do if I was there? I speculate on that very often. Because I'm glad you brought this up, because I do always put myself in a place of checks and balances when it comes to that. So will these beliefs that I'm holding about that not allow me to be part of the positive in changing those third world countries? Knowing that I have responsibility for those people because it's my experience. See, it's a matter of doing that. It's a matter of knowing that these guys are taking on a challenge in our life right now. You think about it. The world, we're able to exist this way because they're not eating. That's the perspective where I come from when it comes to that. So yes, I agree with you. But my perspective says, what are we doing about this? Because yes, I have the power of choosing my experience. And yes, I'm responsible for it. So I take responsibility for those people that are getting killed. Because I am here, able to feel and think and be. And these things are within that thing I call life. That thing that I can call myself as living. So when you take away separation, the responsibility literally falls right in your lap. And it's not a conventional sense of responsibility where I can push a button or pull a string and make it change. It's understanding that on a spiritual level, on a bigger level, I have faith that the transpiring motion of what makes life possible is going to allow me to serve. It's going to give me the opportunities to serve because I take responsibility for it. Does that make sense? Chewy, you look like you want to say something.
No, I'm just
like,
trying to process what you're saying. I'm kind of leaning, I mean, with what Michael said a little bit. And we had someone who's sitting here with us who, was raped or has been starving for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to have a really different opinion of what you're saying right now. Because,
they might.
You know what I mean?
They might.
And kind of what you were going the other day at the breakfast, that we have that animal instinct,
Yeah.
that animal in us. And I kind of believe that too, People have that animal instinct in them. So they kind of, where am I going with these? That's why they get defensive.
Fight or flight?
Yeah.
Kind of a thing?
Yeah. And that's why sometimes they defend their beliefs and they get very defensive. Because if someone was a victim of something...
May I ask a quick question?
Uh-huh.
I think that I agree with what you're saying, because if there may be somebody that would be sitting here that has been a victim to those things. And they may disagree. But do you not believe that there's someone like me there, too?
I'm trying to understand that. I'm trying to understand that, though.
Somebody there in those conditions, just like me, saying we don't have to be this way? We don't have to feel this way. We have power. We have control.
Yeah, you can be saying that. You can be saying that, but that person, there's no way that person or anything
But
inside that person.
I think
we don't know what they're thinking. That's the thing.
Yeah,
we know what that person's thinking in a way.
We don't.
know.
Until we go over there. I've
That's a fair statement, but it also contradicts something you said earlier, which is you put yourself in their place in your mind, and you try
only
to model
in
that.
my
So-
own responsibility for my experience.
So I can't imagine a lot of these things that people have gone through. I can only say, like, what are some of the more traumatic things that I've been in, like getting in fights and things like that. And I know in those experiences, I'm not in charge. Like, whatever I think of as me is not in charge. Like, the animal that's inside my brain is in charge, and it drives my behavior. And, I mean, since today is a day of referencing movies, let's talk about the movie 127 Hours, where, you know, that guy gets trapped and his arm is pinned in a boulder, and he's there for, 127 hours is 5 days.
Yeah.
And he ends up cutting his arm off to get free. And we watch that movie as human beings, and we say, could I do that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think anyone who is honest with themselves says, no, I couldn't do that.
Now,
but here's the thing.
Okay.
If you were in that situation, you absolutely would do that. Why? Because you would get to the point where the animal took over, and you're not in charge anymore. And you do whatever you need to do to survive. So bringing that right here and now, Brian, like, could you cut your arm off right now?
Now let me ask you one question.
Go ahead, but answer mine first.
No, because the question is the answer. The question asks, would you ever end up in that situation if you didn't believe that way? The power of the universe allows us to become the experience that we know is possible for ourselves. So he got trapped in that rock, yes, because of his beliefs.
Right, because he kind of imagined that would happen.
And he knew he had the strength to do it before he ever got there. So, when he did it, he knew he could do it, which was the scariest part for himself, which is why he lived through it.
And I guess that's such a convenient explanation. Like, that's so convenient because you never have to back it up, Brian.
That's right. And does anybody have to back anything up in life? Ever?
Yeah.
Who judges you besides you?
Everyone that you interact with.
No. Only if you let them. The judgment is a matter of perspective. Somebody can say the rudest thing to you, and you can hear nothing but bells and whistles.
Yeah.
You might, but I'm gonna hear that.
But see, it's a matter of choice. And like I said, you're in my experience because why? Because it allows me to express.
It's that animal inside us, like he was saying.
Yeah, I don't know. My experience has taught me such different things. Like, you.
That's okay. That's
good.
good.
You don't accomplish things without bringing people together.
If I may share,
to accomplish
this
things.
is. I want to use a Wayne Dyer representation or reference here because I love it. I think it's absolutely beautiful, and God rest his soul. He's no longer with us, but he is. He's more with us.
I'm not familiar with Wayne Dyer.
Well, he's written many books. Wonderful spiritual leader. He said the first 9 months of our life, we had everything provided for us. Everything worked. This is providing that we were born healthy. Even if we didn't have all 5 toes on each foot, whatever, we were still born and we got to live. And everything was provided during that time. Now, to address this immediately, that was not because of Mom. Yeah, Mom was the host. She was the body that allowed us to flourish and grow. But she did not use any type of conventional methods to keep the baby alive. She fed herself like she would any other day. She drank water just like she would to sustain herself. The miracle of life, whatever you call that, continued to provide for the baby. Continued to use the mom's body as an instrument, harmoniously, to keep the baby alive. So for that first 9 months, did we have to take responsibility for our experience? Well, that's a whole other debate. But when that baby was born, what happens? We get swatted on the ass, and then from that moment forward, somewhere, somebody told us that life is different, that we're no longer provided for, that things don't work out. or that life is random. Things happen by chance. You got to protect yourself. You have to worry. You have to be smart and prevent things before they happen. All of these things, they're not really contradictory because it's still part of life, right? It's a different part of life. As soon as you come out of the womb, there's a reason they call it whoa, man. No, I'm just kidding. Because you come out and you're like, wait, everything's different. I know that was a corny joke, but I liked it. Anyways, you come out, and then what's to say the next 90 years aren't the same? That this is just like when we were in the womb, except there seems to be more things, different things happening, different faculties that we have been taught that we have control of, which I think the conventional sense of control is what gives air to that idea that things can go wrong or that the experience is not your responsibility. And I think that's where it comes from. When you're a baby, we could debate that about what you're actually doing there. But that's a spiritual, eternal level type of talk. We'd go to another level of us. But when we're in our bodies now and growing up, most people think they don't choose their family. Who says? Who says you didn't choose your family? For the purpose of why you're here.
I mean, that's the funny thing. Like, this is, I feel like, the crux of the difference in perspective that exists between you and I, at least, is that you say we're born and then we're taught these things. We're taught that we're not in control and we're taught that we're not provided for. And I say, I wasn't taught that. I just experienced that. Like, that's what I could say the world taught me that. And you would say, I taught myself that.
Because I am the world.
Right. And my experience just tells me different. So...
And that's okay.
So at the end of the day, what's the point? I mean, what's the point of this conversation?
Well, let me ask you, would you not feel better from a perspective knowing that if your experience was your responsibility, would you not feel more empowered that you could do something about what you're experiencing and what you're going to experience?
That's like asking me, wouldn't I feel better if I believed in God and when I died I would go to heaven and live in eternal happiness?
Is it?
Yes.
Though?
Yes, I would feel better. I would feel better if that was true, but I can't believe it.
Is that really the same,
Because I'm
though?
not in charge of my beliefs.
Well, what I'm saying is,
I don't get to
is that the
choose my
same thing, though?
beliefs.
Because what you're saying is something after you die. I'm talking about while you're living.
It's the same thing. You're asking me to believe in something I don't believe in.
It's the same thing as tomorrow. You don't know you're going to have it tomorrow.
You're asking me to choose a belief, and I don't think that's possible.
No, I don't want you to choose a belief. What I'm asking is, does
Wouldn't
it not
you
make
feel
you feel better to express how you know you can get through this thing we call life? Doesn't it make you feel good to express that? To know that I know how I'm going to get through this.
And I don't.
And that's okay, but that's why I'm asking. Would it not make you feel good if you did?
And I've answered your question.
So
I can't do that.
You can't do that. Okay.
No, it's not possible. I do not believe that I have control over my beliefs.
So
I don't believe that.
Is that a
anyone
bad
has
feeling for
control
you,
over
or is that
beliefs.
good?
It just is.
So
it's neither bad nor good. It just is.
Do you feel empty, or do you feel like life is still fullness? Is it goodness?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, so where I'm going with this is that to help someone else, how do we help someone else from the perspective where you're at?
That's a simple question. I mean, the answer is simple, but not easy.
Right, I agree.
You
I'm genuinely
help
curious.
Help them survive. If they have a need, you help fulfill it.
Mm-hmm.
You demonstrate compassion. You say, "Oh, I see you in your pain, and here maybe I can do some small something to help alleviate that pain." And I think it is in that. again, I'm not an expert on this, and I'm formulating these opinions on a day-to-day basis, but that's what I think right now. I think that the way that we transcend ourselves as an animal, as an individual being, is by demonstrating compassion for other people, which is, in a world where all our behaviors are, I think, fundamentally selfish, the least selfish thing we can do.
I'm getting a little emotional right now because you just struck on one of the things I think we all met for, was that no matter what perspective we have, if we use compassion, that's something we have in common. If we want to help another person, how do we do it from where we are? That seems to be our bridge.
Without changing their beliefs.
Yeah, we don't have to change each other in the conventional sense.
Yeah, you can't change someone's beliefs.
There's no conventional
right
approach to that.
Yeah,
There is, but we don't need it.
That's actually a really good statement, Chewy. Thank you for saying that. You can't change someone else's beliefs.
You can help them.
I can't even change my own beliefs.
But you can help them, like you know, you can help them.
But see, think about what you're doing right now.
Beliefs.
Think about what you're doing right now by saying that, though. That's already trying to change someone else's belief. Because we don't have to focus on that, right? We already found the focus, that it's right here, compassion. We don't even need to acknowledge different beliefs to get here.
They still exist. They still exist.
What I mean, that's what I'm saying. We don't have to acknowledge that. We don't even have to focus on that. Yes, we can make it whatever we want when we come back out here. But if we look here, what we have in common, the bridge that we've got, the bridge that gets us here, where there is that place that we can look each other in the eyes and we know what we're doing.
For compassion, you mean? But
yeah, because compassion, you think about that. What is that?
Yeah.
Why do we have those type of things in common? Compassion, love, these things that they may be abstract or inert in some form, but we all look at it and we can say, all right, however you see love, I am down with. However you see compassion, I support you.
Oh, okay.
However you get to feel those things, or you helping others, however you do that. That's fascinating to me because, I mean, do I sound like John Lennon right now, or what I'm
I don't think it's that simple.
When you say believe, when you say compassion, and we all have that in common, right? Compassion. But I believe there's another bridge to get a compassion. There can be someone who has belief still going to affect it, because there can be someone right here who's violent, who doesn't, violent, kills people or whatever, and they're not going to be here. I believe there's a bridge in order for people to be here with compassion.
So let me ask you a question
and their
on
beliefs
that.
affect it.
Do you expect compassion in return?
No, not from everyone.
So then maybe the person that's murdering people just needs the bridge to be given to them, rather than us expecting them to give it to us, because that is what I'm talking about, responsible for our experience. Somebody's doing something terrible. Well, how can I take responsibility in making that person feel better so that they don't have to do that? And I don't want to go too far on the touchy side of things.
Yeah.
But there is nothing that says those people aren't that way because of us.
Yeah, but they're still doing it because of their belief.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
People are coming from the ground just like we did, or whatever. However you see that, we're coming through into this life, and people are acting out in a certain way. One person feels one way. This other person feels like they want to kill everyone. Who's to say that? Who am I to say that that's wrong?
You're a person who doesn't want to get killed.
I don't want to get killed.
And
but at the same time,
you can have that level of compassion with other
I'm not going to lie to you.
who don't want to
If
get
I
killed.
knew that I could get killed and that it would do something good, then I would let that person kill me.
I'm trying.
It would have to do a lot of good. It'd have to do more.
I don't believe you.
Well, you don't have to, because to do that is not going to be a conversation. That's why it's you may not fathom it. But here's the thing: it would have to do more good than me existing, and that is not as common anymore. It used to be a lot more common to die for your country and die for your village and die for this, die for that.
Does that mean it was better?
It doesn't mean it was better. It means that it was able to allow more than them staying at home. So in this perspective where I'm at right now, I'm not saying this video is going to stop all murderers. But what I'm saying is that my drive and my proliferation in life, what I'm doing and what it's going to ultimately do as a result on the grand scheme of things, dying would have to be a better purpose. I mean, you look at the universe and you can see, even in physics, they're seeing that everything is so perfectly efficient that we don't even understand it. We don't understand it in a conventional sense.
I don't know.
I mean, just look at the way that we have perfect air and water and everything to live on this rock.
But that's from our perspective.
It could be chance. It could be whatever we want to call it. Right. But the thing is it's happening, and the universe is sustaining whether we think precious life is possible or not. There's something that is allowing matter and allowing antimatter and all these things. The only reason I'm going to that level is look at the way that is. So for me to exist, it's part of that. And if the universe says you're done, Brian's body no longer needs to be here, that's going to be for the greater purpose of whatever the universe wants. So that's what I mean, is me to sit here and say, oh, I'll die for everyone. I'm so noble. It's not what it's about. It's about, is that murderer going to kill me because it's part of the ultimate picture? That's the type of responsibility we can live from. We can say, whatever happens it's not saying whatever happens. It's saying...
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're saying whatever happens.
Well, we really don't have to commit to anything anymore. What do you guys want to do? No, it's more so like we can live from the perspective that we don't have to be separate from that plan. So accepting that your own cognitive ability is actually in alignment with that. It actually is that movement of the universe. It's not just in alignment with it. It is that. Because where else does it come from? Is it just chemical reactions? Good. Chemical reactions are part of the universe.
So it's not whatever happens. It's whatever happens is actually, by the way, what I wanted to happen.
Absolutely.
That seems like a profoundly...
Absolutely.
Not humble thing to say.
Well, who's humble? Who's humble in whose eyes for what reason? The universe doesn't say, oh, I better cover myself because I don't want anybody to see. No. The universe is like, just what it is. It doesn't get judged. It may judge itself.
Yeah, I guess I hold people to a different standard than I hold the universe to in terms of behavior.
Well, and that's exactly what I'm saying, is that the people are that.
And they're
no
not.
matter how they
act.
act. Well, that's okay.
I don't think they
like
are.
I said,
we have a responsibility.
Even you saying that is that. Because the universe does not... It's objective in a certain standpoint where that's why diversity is. You know? But diversity is very much... We're so diverse that we're the same in a certain light. You know? Imagine infinity sitting right next to infinity. It's like, oh, wow. Well, I mean, they're infinity, so they're not alike, but they're not...
What are you talking about?
Just what I'm saying is the miraculousness of all this. You can't... You don't compare rocks and grass. But you can. I can say I really like grass because it feels better when I hit my head on it. You know? Just going out there on a limb right now with... I know this is getting a little... it's a little nebulous, but... Other people's beliefs, other people's feelings, thoughts, whatever they're doing. If we accept that there's a grand truth and that some people can be separate from that, then we ultimately allow permission for ourselves to be separate from that.
I don't think there's a grand truth. So does my belief that I don't think there's a grand truth make me separate from it?
No, even believing that there isn't a grand truth is a grand truth. Because you're deciding one thing about everything.
Oh, that's okay.
You know what I mean?
I don't know what to do with that.
And that's all I'm saying, is that, like, whatever it is that you call yourself or life, does there have to be any distance, any walls to get over? Is there any?
Sorry, you spun me out in a puzzle and I stopped listening.
Oh. See, if only everybody could do that. If people could just say that, wait a minute, let me just take in what you just said instead of saying and turning you off and saying you're a terrible person and I disagree with you. Because I agree with what you guys are saying. I think it's really, really great that there's these differences and that we need to be aware of them and how we can be at peace with that and know that life is going to provide us those things for whatever reason we want. Like whatever reason, I mean, even if you don't think that you have choice in it, or that you might think it's God or whatever your perspective is, we can still say, hey, okay, God, give me the strength today to not be in judgment, not be, take adversity with embrace and compassion, and we can do these things no matter where we come from, and that's why I think we come back to this. Like, what do you think?
I got lost a little too with what you were saying right now.
Was it the grass and rocks thing?
The grass and rocks and infinity. Well, no, when you said infinity was infinity, I was like facing each other.
Next to
infinity next to infinity.
Like,
well,
you're talking
that's
about.
basically what the three of us are. Infinity's talking to infinity. Like, because can I sit here and say, hey, I know how Michael was. I know how he exists. I know exactly what it is. It's biological processes and atomic vibration and all these things. Science is quite profound, but the minute, just like the Taoists would say, the minute what you call the Tao is no longer the Tao. Because you put a confine on it, even God, the minute, you've probably read this, I know it says it somewhere in the Bible, it alludes to the fact that the minute you define God, it limits God. So it's the same thing as if I were to try to tell you what you are, instead of just accepting you as infinity, then it becomes something.
See, and I think that I am a somewhat abnormally intelligent ape that has this bizarre notion that it is conscious, sitting here trying to figure out what that means.
Well, that's excellent. Well, I gotta say, you're one of the coolest apes I've ever met.
Thank you. Yeah, but I guess to bring it back to the beginning of this conversation, because I think we're running out of time. You got to watch on.
Yeah, we're definitely getting there. If I may,
hang on.
Yeah.
To bring it back to, like, I guess what I'm wrestling with, and what I hope the people watching this video wrestle with as well, and if they have any insights into it, please send them my way. Is what's the goal? Like, when you come to the point in a conversation like this where you're like, okay, we found that thing, we found that core belief,
Mm-hmm.
that core belief where, I don't know what that thing is, I'm going to attack it. I don't know what that thing is, I'm going to try to learn about it. Like, when those two things are fundamentally incompatible, what do you do? Because I don't think the right response is to fight. But I don't necessarily think the right response is to continue beating your head against the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know.
It may not be, but if did you want to say something, Chip?
No.
Okay, I was just going to share. I think this is some great insight here. This is from Beverly Flaxington. She had a story she wrote here about behavioral differences, and I think it's debatable whether or not beliefs are behavior, but whether which one is the sponsoring attribute or not. But either way, I really like how she kind of brought out something up here, and I think it could go along with what we're saying, is that she had wrote here, we can learn to leverage and appreciate the differences, but only when we put a value on behavior that differs from our own. And I like that, because if we can accept that somebody's beliefs or someone's way of being sort of gives some of that behavior to us, because when somebody believes something and expresses it a certain way, that could be the behavior of this person. That could be a certain manner of being. And I think we can use that across the board, where if we can just appreciate the difference and actually value it, value the fact that it differs from us. You know, and understand that the difference is. I see you laughing.
I think she's talking about behavior within standards of general acceptance. Like,
it could
if
be.
someone is if I am laying on the ground and someone is punching me in the face over and over and over, I'm sorry, I'm not putting a value on that behavior.
But we didn't say
I would
that.
put a value on them stopping that behavior.
I get. I could go into that too, because believe me, there's ways to accept that and appreciate that. But what I'm saying is, you mentioned, what do we do in a conversation like this, and what do people do when they run into that wall of providing that they abide by laws and things like that, and we, still a civil society of some sort. At least for this conversation, I think that we could use that we can leverage and appreciate the differences. And I like how she included leverage, because that's what I'm talking about how you decide what your experience is. Decide what it is. And then I think as soon as you do that and you find value in the differences or similarities, whatever you decide to see it as, then I think that transitions pretty well. Wouldn't you agree? They're like, the minute you stop focusing on how you want to continue the conversation, and then you kind of go to, all right, I appreciate this, then maybe you end up asking the person if you want to have coffee sometime instead. Or, it changes your focus to something like, hey, I kind of appreciate where you're coming from. Even if you don't say it audibly. You just it transitions your own intention about where you want to go next. Maybe that's the ultimate thing here, is that just allowing a transition to move forward, instead of staying right there thinking that there has to be a battle, a victory of some kind,
Yeah.
Because the victory really comes in all forms.
Yeah, and it's not I don't think it should be a fight.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Wow. Chewy, any final words?
Wrap it up for us, Chewy. Just
Yeah,
button it all
just
up.
make it
just
nice.
give us that profound insight. No pressure.
It's
No
hard
pressure,
to-
though.
There's no way we can wrap this up. We went all over the place.
Well, until next time, guys, that was an absolutely wonderful conversation. Thank you guys so much for being here. Stay tuned for more. We've got some new exciting events coming up. And just go ahead and click subscribe below so that you can stay up to date with what we're doing.